when the skeletal remains of 22 years old, Caitlin Markham were found 2 years after she went missing in a wooded area in rural Cedar Grove, Indiana, 30 miles away from her Fairfield home. Authorities, who were initially racking their brains on what could have happened to her, then began to ask questions on who killed Caitlin Markham. Over the years, detectives did all they could to solve the mystery behind her murder, following every lead. Finally, after 12 years, the Caitlin Markham's cold case has been solved and her killer arrested. Hello, and welcome to Inside Crimes. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more crime cases. Caitlin Helene Markham was born on the 16th of August, 1990 in Hamilton County, Ohio. Growing up, Caitlin Markham would always light up a room with her bubbly personality. Her family members described her as a light who was warm and showed compassion to others. In a documentary about her death, her younger sister Allie said, "Caitlin always took care of me. Her bubbly and spirit-free nature made family and friends compare her to a butterfly. She grew up loving everything arts." Caitlin pretty much had her life planned out before college. At 22 years old, she was wrapping up her undergraduate studies from the Art Institute of Cincinnati in Ohio, and she was already engaged to be married. Caitlin, who was saving up money to move to Colorado with her fiancé immediately after marriage, had 2 jobs. She worked at her campus bookstore and at David's Bridal. Sadly, her bright future would not come to stay as horror struck 2 days to her 22nd birthday. Around 9 p.m. at night, on the 13th of August 2011, Caitlin Markham arrived home to her apartment in Fairfield after her work shift was over at the bridal shop. On getting home, she was met with her fiancé, John Carter, who was already there waiting for her return. Later that evening, a friend of Caitlin also came over to hang out with the couple, but she ended up leaving after she sensed the tension between Caitlin and John. The friend noticed that Caitlin seemed quiet. She asked John why the couple were acting weird, and John said it was due to magic mushrooms that he and Caitlin had taken. Later that evening, according to John Carter, he left Caitlin's condo to meet up with some friends for a bonfire at 11 p.m. Caitlin Markham, who stayed back home, was said to have been reportedly annoyed with John Carter for leaving. By the following day, Caitlin Markham had mysteriously vanished overnight from her apartment with no trace. Around 8 p.m., John Carter, who visited her to check if she was okay since she wasn't picking up his calls or replying his messages, called 911 and told the operator that his fiancée had gone missing. John Carter was heard saying, "My fiancée is missing. I can't find her anywhere. I saw her at like 12 o'clock last night. She stays in a house by herself, so I'm really nervous. Her car is still there. I'd been trying to get a hold of her, and I decided to go by her house and see if she was okay, and her car was still there. She would be at work right now with her car, which is why I'm like really freaking out." Officers from the Fairfield police then began an investigation into the case, searching for leads in Caitlin Markham's disappearance. Days after her disappearance, family, friends, and people who care came out in their hundreds, volunteering to search for Caitlin Markham around her home, her neighborhoods in Fairfield, the Art Institute, and the Tri-County Mall where she worked. But hours turned into days, days into months, and months into years. There was no sign of Caitlin Markham anywhere. Cell phone records showed she sent a final text that Carter reported in the early hours of August 14, 2011, at 12:52 a.m. Since that moment in time, investigators found no signs of cell phone or credit card activity. The first set of suspects were her family and friends. Since John Carter was the last person to see her alive, the investigators questioned him about the night he saw her last. John told the detectives that the last time he heard from Caitlin was when he was at the bonfire night. He said few minutes before 1 a.m., Caitlin had texted him a photo she liked that her boss had taken. When asked where he went after the bonfire, he told detectives that around 4 a.m., he went to his home, which he shared with his mother, and fell asleep. The next day, he said he sent Caitlin Markham a good morning text, but he never got a reply. By afternoon, Carter said unlike Caitlin, she still hadn't returned his text. By the end of the day, John claimed to have not heard from her. So he became worried and decided to go to her apartment to check on his fiancée. He said on getting to her house, her car was in the driveway. Her dog was inside, but Caitlin was nowhere to be found. He was asked if he and Caitlin had been having issues in their relationship, to which he replied, not at all. However, Caitlin's friend, Michelle, made a contrast to this. In fact, Michelle had told the media that Caitlin and John had a pretty heated argument just 2 days before her disappearance. According to Michelle, on August 12, 2011, John and Caitlin allegedly got into an argument about money issues. Despite their differences, the couple went to a festival at a nearby church that evening. According to Michelle, John and Caitlin's dispute spilled over onto the occasion. Caitlin eventually became upset and decided to leave the festival early. It's also conceivable that John and Caitlin made up before she disappeared. But as was already said, the couple appeared to be having some tension the next night as well. At Caitlin's condo, a friend chose to leave after getting the impression that the couple preferred to be by themselves. Many people at the time, including Caitlin's family, believed that John Carter had something to do with her disappearance. They disputed John Carter's claim that Caitlin's moody and unusual quiet behavior on the night her friend came to visit was because he and Caitlin had consumed magic mushrooms. They reasoned that since the friend came over around 15 minutes after Caitlin got home from work, it is not possible that she would start experiencing the effects of the mushrooms that rapidly, even if she had taken them as soon as she entered her condo. Some people, however, have questioned whether Caitlin even consumed the mushrooms in the first place. It seemed odd that she would want to experience the effects of mushrooms if she merely wanted to relax at home after a long day of work. She had just arrived home and was exhausted. The bonfire was another peculiar element of John's story that several people thought was weird. On August 13, at around 11 p.m., John claimed to have left Caitlin's condo to meet up with friends. He brought along a bag filled with Caitlin's documents, which he intended to burn at the bonfire. John clarified that Caitlin wanted to shred the papers rather than discard them, but she did not have a shredder. He then took the documents instead, intending to destroy them so she wouldn't have to worry about it. Although some people think this is an unusual justification for why he destroyed Caitlin's documents. At first, it didn't seem like too much of a stretch. It's possible that he really was doing Caitlin a favor by removing the papers from her house, because he admitted to the investigators that he frequently ran errands for her. However, some have generally questioned John's alibi. A handful of the friends John claimed to have been with that evening have provided contradictory accounts. Some others even assert that there wasn't even a bonfire that night. Even though there was a lot of speculation regarding John, it seems that gradually, the focus of the investigation shifted. John Carter had frequently addressed Caitlin's issue in the media over the years, and he has maintained his denial of any participation in her disappearance. On the 16th of August, 2011, 3 days after Caitlin's disappearance, John Carter mentioned being scared and concerned during one of the searches for his fiancée. In his words, he said, "I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. I just want to find Caitlin and celebrate her birthday with her and go to Red Lobster like she was planning." He later stated that Caitlin was strong and would fight her way out if she is somewhere and is in a worst-case scenario. However, the search for Caitlin came to an end when, after many days, she wouldn't be found. The case went cold for nearly 2 years until on April 7, 2013, when a couple who was reportedly looking for scrap metal came across what appeared to be a grocery bag containing a human jaw and a skull with hair still attached to it. The couple would immediately call 911. In order to identify the remains of the victim, a Franklin County, Indiana coroner, Wanda Lee, used dental records which ultimately confirmed that the remains were Caitlin Markham's. Her death was then ruled a homicide, but her cause of death could not be determined. When the news of her death got to her family, they were unavoidably devastated to find out that she had been a victim of a homicide. They were also not overly shocked by the information. Her family held on to hope that she would be found safe when she first went missing. Their hopes faded as weeks turned into months without any trace of her. They eventually came to the conclusion that Caitlin had been murdered. On April 18, 2013, Caitlin Markham's family and friends gather for a celebration of life at Harbin Park, one of her favorite places. 4 months later, on the 25th of August 2013, her funeral was held at her alma mater, Fairfield High School. The room was decorated with many bright colors, just the way she would have loved it. Her fiancé, John Carter, was in tears as he spoke in front of the crowd and called Caitlin the love of his life. "We would have had our kiss. We would have had our marriage. We would have had our honeymoon. We would have had our kid. We would have had our life, and we would have grown old together," said John Carter. Since Caitlin Markham's remains were found in Indiana, the Indiana State Police joined in the investigation. In the years following the discovery of her remains, Caitlin Markham's family hired a private investigator to look into the case as well. Though the Fairfield Police and Indiana State Police had opened an investigation on the case, Caitlin's family reportedly felt enough resources were not being dedicated to her death. The Caitlin Markham's case grew to garner national attention over the years. In the year 2016, a documentary was made in her honor to celebrate her life. Her family and friends were featured in the 1-hour documentary, which was titled "Taken Too Soon: The Caitlin Markham Story." The documentary also got featured on a syndicated TV show named Crime Watch Daily. On Caitlin Markham's 27th birthday, her family and friends gathered at a Springdale, Ohio movie theater to watch the premiere of the documentary. Her family kept hope alive, believing that the documentary would bring answers to their daughter's murder case. Over the years, many rumors and theories, some fueled by social media, have surfaced as to what happened to Caitlin Markham. One theory stated that she died of a drug overdose, and those with her panicked, taking her body to Indiana and dumping it on a rural road in Franklin County. Other theories point to family and friends being responsible for her death, including her fiancé, John Carter. After a lot of investigation, Sheriff's detective announced that there was a suspect in the case, but a name was not mentioned. However, the arrest of Michael Strauss and his past life prompted speculation about the unsolved homicide of Caitlin Markham at the time. Police say Michael Strauss is responsible for the death of 23-year-old Ellen Week at his Liberty Township home. Michael Strauss was charged with murder after a body believed to be Ellen Week was found in a field on Milliken Road. Ellen Week was also said to have disappeared from her home like Caitlin did. Michael Strauss was considered a suspect in Caitlin Markham's case at the time because there were photos posted online which featured Michael Strauss, Caitlin Markham, and other friends. These photos suggested that Michael Strauss was an acquaintance of Caitlin Markham. As the investigation progresses, Michael Strauss was never pinned as Caitlin Markham's killer, having exhausted all leads. The reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Caitlin Markham's killer grew to $100,000 over the years. But despite the investigation on the case by multiple law enforcement agencies, her case remained unsolved for over a decade. However, there appeared to be a break on the 17th of February, 2023, when detectives arrested Jonathan Palmerton, a close friend to Caitlin Markham and a childhood friend to John Carter. Jonathan was arrested at his workplace, and prosecutors say he had lied in an interview in April 2022 during the investigation of Caitlin Markham's cold case. After a search warrant was filed for his home, investigators retrieved some incriminating evidence that suggested he lied in connection to Caitlin's murder. He was later charged with felony and perjury, and his bond was set at $50,000. Markham's father said Palmerton's arrest makes him hopeful, but he remains guarded as the case progresses. A month after Jonathan Palmerton was arrested for perjury, John Carter, Caitlin Markham's fiance was apprehended at his workplace as a suspect to her death. Investigators revealed discovering incriminating evidence at his home in Fairfield during a search. These evidence suggested John Carter as the suspect they have been looking for. John Carter appeared in court and pled not guilty. However, Butler County Prosecutor Mike G. Moser revealed new details in court about the discovery of Caitlin's body. He said there were a set of 3 or 4 sharp force wounds to Caitlin's left wrist. According to forensic report, the place where Caitlin Markham's body was ultimately found is probably not where the body was first deposited. During the argument for a high bond, G.M. Moser read writings that he said detectives found inside John Carter's mother's home during a recent search warrant. John Carter had lived in his mother's home at the time of Caitlin's death. One of the writings says, "Deep down, I love her. You want to kill her, but I love her. She must die. I can't kill her. Yes, you can. No, yes, how do you talk me into all these things? I'm just that good, but you're bad. I know. How do I kill you? You can't. You're right. About what? Nothing." It was as if John Carter was fighting and conversing with a demon. Other documents revealed in court stated that John Carter suffers from PTSD and depression. John Carter was placed on a $1 million bond, but posted bail on the 4th of April, 2023. He stood in court wearing only an ankle monitor after his $1 million cash bond. He was allowed to face the judge unshackled. His trial date is set for June 2024, and he will remain out of jail during that time. After John Carter was arrested, Caitlin's dad, Dave Markham, said, "It's not a surprise. I mean, I did suspect him all along. I think a lot of people, if not a vast majority of people, suspected him. Dave thinks John Carter's arrest could mean he and Allie may finally have justice for their daughter and sister's murder." When 25 years old, William Newton's dismembered body parts were discovered in a West Hollywood dumpster in 1990. The small LGBT community in which he belonged was shook with the news of his murder, especially because his death occurred at a time when the gay community was already overwhelmed by the HIV and AIDS pandemic. This gruesome cold case haunted West Hollywood for more than 32 years. It was the gay community's version of the Black Dahlia murder. Over the years, investigators put forth a lot of effort to crack the case, but they failed for years. However, 3 decades later, a team of amateur sleuths have solved William Newton's case. This case takes us to Los Angeles, a city which is known as the entertainment center of the world. Los Angeles has been a home to a wide variety of attractions and activities, including movie studios, the Sunset Strip, Venice Beach, prominent museums, theme parks, vineyards, breweries, outdoor activities, and a vibrant nightlife. Over the years, people found something of interest in the city as it has many things to offer everyone. William Arnold Newton was born on the 26th of July, 1965, in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. His parents were not married and were living separately. While growing up, William discovered his passion for arts. Oftentimes, he was seen by friends engaging in creative writings and poems, which reflects nature and his soul. According to his friends, William Newton saw himself as a poet and an illustrative artist. He was talented in so many ways. His father, Richard Harriman, once told the media that his son was a very intelligent young man. William Newton spent the major part of his childhood in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, where he was born. During his stay there, he went to elementary and junior high school. After he finished junior high, he and his mother, whose name hasn't been stated in any reports, moved to another city called Ladysmith in Wisconsin in the year 1979. Their stay at Ladysmith wasn't too long because immediately after William Newton's freshman year of high school in 1980, he and his mother moved again to Oklahoma City. The sudden, endless change of environments did not seem to please William, who needed more stability. So he made up his mind and packed up his bags to go live with his father, Richard Harriman. He felt his father would be more than happy to receive him. After all, he was his son. But that was not the case, because on getting to Eau Claire, where his father lived, he was given a shocking reception. His father told him to leave and go back home to his mother. William Newton, who was 16 years old at the time, felt broken and shattered. However, since he never considered going back to live with his mother, William embraced his independence and took a bold step to start a new life on his own. For the next 3 years, William Newton traveled around the United States before finally settling in Los Angeles in 1985. One of the cities he lived in was Oklahoma. During his stay there, he met a man named Terry Elliott with whom he began a romantic relationship. William also discovered his love for beauty and makeup, and this led him to make a decision to pursue a career as a professional beautician. He studied all there was to know about skincare, makeup, and fashion. Upon the completion of his makeup training, he earned his beautician license. In 1984, William Newton moved to Los Angeles and started a new life. In spite of the struggles and challenges that comes with starting a new life in a new place, William never had to wait too long for opportunities. His solid curriculum vitae, which detailed his professionalism as a beautician, quickly got him a job at an entertainment industry that produced music videos. William was employed as a makeup artist and a choreographer. Since he wasn't working full-time, he later took up another job at the gay bathhouse known as Hollywood Spa. During one of his shifts at night, he met a man named David Ray, who had instantly liked his personality. David was said to have been around the vicinity to serve as a judge to a beauty contest for a local gay magazine. William's encounter with David was another stepping stone to the peak of his career. David Ray was an adult film producer whose area of expertise was the gay adult videos. David saw William as a prospect and decided to embrace him, introducing him to the gay movie industry and helping him land roles in several gay erotic movies. Over time, William and David's relationship went beyond just a business relationship. The duo became lovers, and in the year 1987, they both formed a partnership and established their own adults movie firm, which they called London Ray Productions. William then started to work at London Ray as a movie producer, makeup artist, and set designer under the name Bill A. London. He also acted movies on the production under the names Billy London and Billy Porter. Since London, Ray Productions was a new establishment, and there wasn't much money to change movie settings. David and William would film their movies in their apartment. Oftentimes, William would redecorate the apartment to make it unique for every movie scene. As their movie production started doing so well and money started rolling in, William and David started to live their best lives. If they were not making movies, they would frequent the bars and clubs partying and having fun. This lifestyle continued for years until in 1990, when the two broke up and started living separately. At the time, around October 1990, William, who was tired of Los Angeles, already made plans to leave temporarily and move to Las Vegas, where his stepsister, Michelle, was living. His sister told the media that William just needed a mental health break at the time. Aside from the new and exciting opportunities Las Vegas would offer him, he would also have the opportunity to reunite with his mother, who had plans to move to the area at the time. However, after making plans and using his last days at Los Angeles to prepare for his departure, fate had other plans for William, who never got on the flight to Las Vegas. One fateful night, on the 28th of October, 1990, William Newton went to a well-known nightclub in Los Angeles, which was known as Rage Nightclub. He sat for a while at his favorite spot in the club, sipping his drink and observing those dancing and having fun around him. After a few shots, he felt free and decided to join the group of clubbers dancing and having fun. Time flew by as he partied into the night, letting loose and having fun. After a few more shots, he realized it was getting late and decided to go home. He stood up and staggered as he walked to the exit of the nightclub. People who saw him could easily tell that he was intoxicated. Though William made it out of the exit doors, he was never seen alive again after that night. The next day appeared to have been a Monday, and residents of Los Angeles started a new week, going about their daily work activities, oblivious to the gruesome murder that had occurred the previous night. That same morning, on the 29th of October, 1990, in an alley just directly behind Santa Monica Boulevard, a homeless person was searching the dumpsters at the area, looking for something to eat or just finding discarded items. He approached the dumpsters one after the other. Upon lifting the lid of a particular dumpster, he discovered a plastic bag, which seemed quite resilient. He tore the bag open, and what he saw shook him to the core. Staring back at him was a human head and feet. In all his years of searching dumpsters, he had never encountered such traumatizing and horrific sight. He immediately closed the dumpster and alerted passers-by about the horrific discovery. After a short while, the authorities got to the crime scene, and the severed head in the dumpster was quickly identified to be that of Williams. The police searched all the other dumpsters in a 2-mile radius around the discovery site to see if other parts of William Newton's body could be found and retrieved. But all search proved abortive. The autopsy that was done on William revealed that he had been high on an addictive drug known as methamphetamine. Also, the forensics revealed evidence of strangulation and blunt force trauma on the head before he was murdered. Detective Wendy Byrne, who is now retired, was one of those detectives who arrived at the scene and was petrified at how gruesomely William Newton's body was mutilated. She said that she was shocked that something like that could happen, even though William was gay and worked in the gay adult film industry. Wendy Byrne said it did not matter to her. He did not deserve to die in such a horrible manner. The Los Angeles Police Department then began an investigation into William Newton's case, searching for clues and leads that could give answers to what exactly had happened to him and why his body parts ended up in a trash. Wendy Byrne was in charge of the team of investigators. She made sure she and her team worked tirelessly on William Newton's case, giving it their very best. In the days and months following the discovery of William Newton's body parts, investigators received hundreds of tips and leads regarding the case, but they all led to a dead end. Investigators interviewed the neighborhood where the remains of William Newton was found, but nobody seemed to know who killed him and where his remaining body parts were. Having exhausted all tips and leads, the investigators had nothing tangible to work with, and the William Newton's case eventually went cold for a long time. 15 years after the murder, in 2005, the Los Angeles Police Department issued a public statement indicating that they were reopening and reinvestigating the William Newton's cold case. They requested tips and leads from the public. But in the long run, nothing of use came out of the investigation and the case went cold again. However, by the end of 2006, William Newton's case gained the media attention once again when Mickey Ski, a Los Angeles reporter, claimed that Richard Harriman had reached out to him, saying the Los Angeles Police Department had neglected solving the murder case of his son. When the Los Angeles Police Department heard about this, they issued a public statement saying they have not forgotten about the William Newton's murder case and that they were doing all they could to solve the case. Richard Harriman had left an email address for contact in case the police wanted to share with him any new development to his son's case. Unfortunately, he was not able to see justice for his son's murder because he passed away in his home on the 30th of May 2011 at the age of 65. In the year 2020, two podcasters, gay authors, and best friends, Christopher Rice and Eric Shaw Quinn, took a liking into the William Newton's cold case. They got to know about the case after Christopher read it from an adult entertainment magazine. Ever since then, the case had remained fixed in their minds. In 2012, they both began their podcast show, which was named The Dinner Party Show. In one of the show's episodes in 2020, Christopher Rice decided to mention the William Newton's case and how there hasn't been an arrest since 1990. At the end of the show, Christopher then appealed to the listeners to come forward with tips and leads that could bring justice to the William Newton's case. A couple of months later, Christopher Rice and Eric Shaw Quinn did another episode on the William Newton's case, where they talked about all the facts they have been able to gather about the case since the last time they spoke about it in their previous episode. Christopher also mentioned on the episode that a man named Ron Wheeler had reached out to him, claiming that he had an important information regarding the case. Ron Wheeler told the podcasters that on the night of October 28, 1990, he had also been at the Rage nightclub where William Newton had visited before he ended up being murdered. According to him, he had seen William leaving the club with another man who looked like Jeffrey Dahmer, the famous American gay serial killer. Jeffrey Dahmer had murdered 17 boys and men in the Milwaukee area between 1970s and 1990s before he was eventually arrested in 1991, 9 months after William Newton's horrific murder. He was then sentenced to 16 life sentences. Even though Jeffrey Dahmer's profile fitted that of someone who could have killed William Newton, there was no way to confirm that since he already died in prison in November of 1994 when a fellow inmate attacked and beat him to death. After Christopher Rice had revealed all he and Eric Shaw Quinn had dug up about the William Newton's case and the possible connection to Jeffrey Dahmer, he was hopeful that someone somewhere who knew something about the case would reach out to them soon with evidence and proofs that could eventually arrest William Newton's murderer. Around the same time, Detective John Lamberti started to have an interest in the William Newton's case. He went through all the evidence, materials, and files his predecessors had used in the case, and was surprised at the amount of efforts they had shown to the case. Using his predecessors' work on the case as a guide, John Lamberti then began to look closely at the case from every angle. While investigating the case, he Google searched William Newton's name and came across Christopher Rice and Eric Shaw Quinn's last podcast episode on the William Newton's case, where they speculated about his murderer being Jeffrey Dahmer. Detective John Lamberti listened to the episode and his interest in the case was heightened. He thereafter reached out to Christopher and Eric, scheduling a meeting with them. During the meeting, 3 of them talked extensively about the case, sharing information on all they knew about the case. At the end of the meeting, their mutual goal was to solve the mystery behind the William Newton's murder case. Apparently, the 3 men were not the only ones fascinated about the William Newton's case. About the same time, a documentary filmmaker known as Rachel Mason had also developed an interest in the case and was busy performing an underground investigation. In 2017, Rachel learned about William Newton's murder by coincidence when she was working on a popular Netflix documentary about a gay adult bookstore known as The Circus of Books. She visited a local writer and an activist named Mike Szymanski while she was looking for tangible and solid contents for the documentary. Mike, who had an old compilations of West Hollywood photos, agreed to allow her look through them all. As Rachel and Mike both perused the album of photos and notebooks, a 1990 article of William Newton's murder case mistakenly fell out, and Rachel couldn't help but stare at it. She picked it up and noticed the article talked about William's murder and how there hasn't been any arrest yet. She asked Mike for more clarity on the case, and Mike gladly filled her in on what he knew about the case so far. Rachel Mason instantly developed an interest in the case, but she needed to work on the Circus of Books documentary. When she was done with the documentary, she began looking for other projects to work on. She then remembered the William Newton's case, which she had read from an article at Mike's place. She slowly began to look closely at the case, and over time, she became obsessed with it. The case wouldn't leave her mind, so she decided to start her own underground investigation. While at it, she was determined to find every piece of information that could bring closure to the case. Rachel then appealed to the public on a gay community group page on Facebook to help with any useful information or tips that could solve the William Newton's case. She further asked for tips on the whereabouts of Jeffrey Dahmer in the year 1990, the period William Newton was murdered. After a while, she received a message from a man named Clark Williams who lives in Sherman Oaks. Clark Williams was a stay-at-home married gay dad who, according to him, was bored after his daughter left for college and then decided to connect with people from his youth through a Facebook group on the gay history of Wisconsin, his home state. Clark Williams, who grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, just like William Newton, became interested in helping to solve the case and believed he could assist Rachel Mason to fill in the blanks of William Newton's lifestyle before his death, since he had a unique viewpoint on what it was like growing up as gay in Wisconsin at the time. He then reached out to Rachel and told her that Jeffrey Dahmer never committed any murders beyond Milwaukee and Ohio. Rachel Mason appreciated the tip and was excited for the new development in the case. Since she was going to write a documentary on the William Newton's case, she needed someone who knew much or little about his life story. She quickly arranged a meeting with Clark Williams to hear what he has to say. During the meeting, Clark Williams mentioned that when he read about William Newton's case on a Facebook group, he felt connected to the case because he and Newton shared similarities. Aside from the fact that they were both gay, they shared the same birth year. "We were born just a week apart," Clark said. Clark could not help but feel connected to the case, hence why he took matters into his hands to help in whatever way he can. Billy Newton was an actual person, a person from my community, and I wanted to do justice for Billy, so he would not just be remembered for how he died, but for how he lived, Clark told the media. The year 1990 was a time when thousands of American gay men died during the AIDS epidemic, and the murder of William Newton reflected the lives of so many gay men and teenagers at the time. After sharing with Rachel all that he knew about the gay community during the time of William Newton's murder, he promised to spend more time on the case personally. He went to Fresno, where Jeffrey Dahmer's mother lived in 1990, asked friends in Milwaukee some questions that could lead to solving William Newton's case, but got nothing. Clark Williams then got in touch with Detective John Lamberti whenever he finds a lead to the case. John Lamberti, who was grateful for the efforts, then brought in Clark and Rachel into the investigation, because at the time, the Los Angeles Police Department did not have the resources needed to solve the case. Clark would often sit down during his spare time to research on William Newton's case. Since William Newton had acted in gay adult movies, Clark shifted focus and dived into the gay pornography industry to search for possible clues. Not long, he discovered a man named Rick Pasquet, who around the time of William Newton's murder had claimed to be a private investigator looking into it. But he was actually in the gay porn industry for 20 years, which he never disclosed. Clark began to make his research on the life of Rick Pasquet. He discovered that his real name was Richard Lawrence, and that he had directed a pornographic film titled The Devil and Danny Webster. This was the head start Clark needs in the case. Since Rick Pasquet and William Newton had worked in the same industry in 1990, he decided to reach out to Pasquet in order to find tips on what could have possibly happened to William Newton. Clark was, however, not able to speak with Rick Pasquet because he had since died. However, he researched the cast of the film he directed, looking for those who might still be alive and who could share their stories about the life of William Newton. He then noticed that a man named Billy Houston, who was still alive, was featured in the movie. Clark made an extensive research into the life of Billy Houston and discovered that he was a new promising cast in the gay adult film industry, and his real name was Darrell Lynn Madden. Further research revealed that Darrell Lynn Madden was alive and serving life sentences in jail after killing 2 gay men, including his friend, Bradley Qualls. According to Darrell, he and Bradley Qualls had committed the first murder when they went out one fateful night with a menacing plan to initiate Bradley Qualls into their skinhead cult group, known as the Chaos Squad Skinheads. And to do this, they needed to kidnap and kill a gay man for the initiation. Darrell and Bradley then calmly lurked in the streets of Oklahoma, waiting for the unfortunate gay man to pass by. A man named Stephen Domer eventually got into their death trap. Darrell and Bradley then lured Stephen into a deserted area. They bound him in his own car and took him to a place where he could be killed easily. Stephen cried, begged, and fought for his life to be spared, but he couldn't overpower two abled men who finally strangled him to death with his own coat hanger. Having killed him, Darrell and Bradley disposed of his body in a close-by creek. In a shocking turn of event, Darrell then pointed a gun at his accomplice and friend, Bradley, shooting and killing him on the spot for no known reason. Darrell then fled the scene, leaving Bradley's corpse behind. However, he could not hide his crimes for long because he was arrested shortly and made to face the consequences of his crimes. Clark Williams was shocked at the kind of person Darrell Lynn Madden was and decided to do further investigation and research into his life in Oklahoma. He then found out that Darrell had once done an interview for a book titled American Honor Killings. Clark, who wanted to get to the root of William Newton's case, decided to get his hands on the book by ordering for it. Due to the limited supply of the book, Clark had to wait for quite a while before he could finally have it at his doorstep. An excited Clark picked up the book and began flipping through the pages. It got to a point where he was shocked at what he read. In the interview, Darrell Lynn Madden had not only mentioned killing Stephen Domer and Bradley Qualls, he also mentioned killing another gay man in Los Angeles, though he failed to provide details of the crime in the book. But Clark was thrilled at the possibility that Darrell could be referring to William Newton since he was gay and had been killed in Los Angeles. Clark strongly had this belief that the killer of William Newton was about to be discovered finally. In order to ascertain this fact, Clark made a call to Detective John Lombardi and met up with him to discuss everything he had found out. John Lombardi, whose cold case department had put back the William Newton's case on the shelf 2 weeks before Clark's tip, did not waste time to inform his team about the new development in the case. They got to work and started making research into the 1990 lifestyle of Darrell Lynn Madden. It was during the research they discovered that the gay movie industry that Darrell had worked for at the time was located on Santa Monica Boulevard, which appeared to have been the area where William Newton body parts were found. All leads were beginning to add up. However, in order to get answers, on January 4th, 2023, Detective John Lombardi took one of his team members, Detective Tamara Momayaz, along with him to travel down to Oklahoma, where Darrell was serving his life sentence for his crimes. On getting to the prison, they realized that Darrell Lynn Madden was now an Orthodox Jew and a proud transgender woman who had changed her name to Darrellyn. She comfortably sat across the two detectives, willing to answer any questions they would throw at her. During the interview, Lombardi and Momayaz asked Darrellyn about William Newton's murder, and they were surprised at how quickly she recollected who William Newton was. Darrellyn told the detectives that on the night of William Newton's murder in October 1990, she and her skinheads friends had spotted William walking down the street. She explained that William had appeared drunk, and they saw him as an easy target for robbery. Darrellyn confessed to approaching William, draping her hands around his shoulders and whispering to him that they were going to rob him, kidnap him, and probably beat the crap out of him. But he would survive the predicament as long as he didn't make a scene or scream for help. Unfortunately, the last statement was a lie, as she ended up strangling him to death, which was confirmed by the coroner at the time before dismembering his body. Detectives Lombardi and Momayaz were bewildered at Darrellyn's revelation of the incident. They further asked her why William Newton's body was dismembered and dropped in a dumpster. Darrellyn, however, claimed not to have anything to do with it. She said she left William's body with her friends after they had killed him. The detectives asked for the names and identity of the two friends, but Darrellyn refused to mention any names, saying, "I might be a murderer, but I am not a snitch." In the days following her confession, Detective John Lombardi, who already had what he needed to finally solve the William Newton's case, presented a solid case against Darrellyn to the Los Angeles County District Attorney, George Gascon's office. However, to their dismay, George Gascon said they won't be filing any case against Darrellyn, as there was not enough evidence to prosecute her. Despite this sad outcome, Detective John Lombardi and other amateur sleuths who had worked tirelessly on the case were still happy that the William Newton's case has finally been solved with his killer behind bars for life. the case was finally closed, and William Newton's stepsister, Michelle Oliver, said she was grateful for the efforts the detectives and amateur sleuths had put into investigating her brother's death. Having some kind of closure helps, Michelle said. However, the grieving sister still wanted answers as to why Darylyn and her friends targeted her brother and where the rest of his body parts are. Sonia Carmen Heroic Stone was born on the 27th of May, 1951. Sonia, who originally lived in Quebec, Canada, moved to the United States in the 1970s, where she afterwards got married to Michael Stone in 1976. The union produced a female child. However, Sonia's marriage to Michael Stone did not last long, as they both divorced and went their separate ways. In the year 1980, Sonia Carmen Stone was a single mother, living alone with her 4-year-old daughter, while she worked for the Levi-Strauss Company. On October 15, 1981, Sonia took her daughter to school and ran a few errands before she returned home. Around 12 p.m., a lady named Caroline McBride, who was a friend to Sonia Carmen, visited her at home, after calling her multiple times and getting no response in return. On getting to the Carmel Point area of Monterey County, California, where Sonia lived, Caroline found the dead body of her friend, Sonia Carmen Heroic, just inside the front door that opened into her living room. 30 years old, Sonia Carmen Heroic appeared to have been sexually assaulted. She was spread out on the floor with her purse, and the content in it spilling close to her body. Sonia was half-dressed and had been strangled with a pair of her own pantyhose, which was found tightly wrapped around her neck. Her shirt and jacket were torn and pulled back. A terrified Caroline placed a call through to the Monterey County Sheriff's Office, who immediately dispatched officers to the crime scene. The investigators were of the opinion that the position where Sonia was found in her home suggested that she was attacked as soon as she opened her front door to go in. They also examined Sonia Carmen's body and discovered that she had a broken left ring fingernail with blood beneath it, which indicated that she had struggled with her killer, ultimately scratching him before her death. The question of who committed such heinous crime bugged the police and the family of Sonia Carmen Heroic for years. By the next day, in a bid to find answers, the police went about the neighborhood asking questions and interviewing those who responded to the knock on their doors. While in the neighborhood, just across the street to Sonia Carmen's house, one of the detectives interviewed a neighbor whose name is Michael Scott Glazebrook. He was 25 years old at the time, and he had a 3 to 4 inch vertical scratch down his right cheek, which the detective noticed. The detective immediately asked him how and when he got the scratch. Glazebrook, however, made inconsistent statements. He told the detective he got it from cutting plexiglass in his garage, while he told his parents that he got it in a fight at Monterey Peninsula College, where he schooled. Due to his inconsistency, Michael Scott Glazebrook was charged with Sonia Carmen's death in 1982. But when the case went to trial in 1983, the jury came back with a 9-3 not guilty verdict, which made the district attorney's office decide not to retry the case, even though a retrial was possible, regardless of the jury's decision. Michael Scott was, however, discharged and acquitted. With no significant DNA technology in the 1970s, the case could not be pursued, and it went cold for 39 years. In the year 2020, detectives at the Monterey County Sheriff's Office and Deputy District Attorney Matt L. Hero re-examined the Sonia Carmen Stone's case. They found out that there were several pieces of evidence in Sonia's case file that could be now tested utilizing modern DNA technology. These pieces of evidence, including the DNA found under Sonia's broken fingernail and right breast, were sent to the Department of Justice DNA laboratory for testing. Since Michael Scott Glazebrook was the #1 suspect on the list of the investigators in 1981, detectives got a search warrant for a new sample of his DNA. They were able to obtain a new DNA profile easily because Michael Scott Glazebrook was still alive and works in Monterey County. After the DNA sample from Sonia Carmen Stone's crime scene was tested and compared with the DNA sample gotten from Michael Scott Glazebrook, it immediately came out as a match. Detectives then conducted surveillance at Michael Scott Glazebrook's residence in the city of Seaside. Around 8 p.m. on the 14th of August, 2021, Glazebrook drove away from his home. He was, however, stopped and taken into custody. In honor of Stone, all detectives wore Levi's jeans during the operation to arrest Michael Scott Glazebrook. After an 8-day jury trial in 2023, Glazebrook, who is now 67 years old, was convicted of the murder of Sonia Carmen Stone and will be sentenced in April, possibly facing a potential lifetime prison sentence without the possibility of parole. Following Glazebrook's convictions, Sonia Carmen Heroic Stone's daughter, who is now 44 years old, said, "It's been a day that we have been waiting for a really long time. Sonia was a wonderful woman and we're so happy to see justice for her."